Welcome to Extreme Reloading, and this episode I'm calling Challenging the King. And the king is the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. Now I've been shooting this one and getting some very nice performance out of this in my Ruger precision rifle for quite a number of years. Now the challenger is the Speer Gold Dot. Now these are both 168 grain bullets, and I just recently started using and shooting the Speer Gold Dot as the result of a couple of our previous episodes of Extreme Reloading. We were looking for the ideal bullet, and what we learned is that this particular Ruger precision rifle shoots bullets that are shorter relative to longer, shoots those shorter bullets better. It also shoots bullets with a very short boat tail and a fairly long bearing surface length. Now you can catch up on all of our past videos by using the link in the description below. But what we're going to do today is, as I already mentioned, challenging the king. And so I'm going to be going out to the range in just a little bit and shooting a couple of 5-shot groups. 5-shot group with the Speer Gold Dot, second 5-shot group with the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. Then we're going to do it again. We'll shoot 2 groups at least with each of those bullets. I'm going to be shooting from 100 yards in the prone position. And based on how those results go, I might also shoot another set of 5-shot groups from 200 yards. It's kind of going to be the best 2 out of 3. Now give me 5 minutes to explain how these loads were developed and what we're going to be shooting today. As I already said, these are 2 different bullets, both 168 grains, but I'm using Lapua brass, and this brass has been weight sorted. In fact, the case weights only vary by up to 4/10 of a grain, so they're real consistent. Prepared those primer pockets, and I'm also going to be using bench rest primers. These are CCI BR2 large rifle primers, and I'm going to be loading 42.9 grains of RL15 precisely weighed on my RCBS electronic scale. And then of course they're topped off with either the Sierra Tipped MatchKing or the Speer Gold Dot. Now the difference in that is not just the bullet, but also the bullet seating depth. I have seated those Sierra Tipped MatchKings. What has worked for me for years is a combined overall length when measured to the ogive of 2.06 inches. The Speer Gold Dot is seated out to have a longer combined overall length when measured to the ogive of precisely 2.20 inches. In fact, 2.200 inches of combined overall length when measured to the ogive. Now what's really interesting is that when I measure the combined overall length, the true combined overall length to the tip of that bullet or the met plat of that bullet, the Sierra Tipped MatchKing is actually still longer. It's longer by a few hundredths of an inch. Now that might sound counterintuitive, but it all has to do with the shape of the bullet. That Speer Gold Dot is a bullet that has a longer bearing surface length and more of a ogive forward approach. That is what might work out very, very well or be advantageous for the Speer Gold Dot. And so far, it's been shooting really, really well. So that sets things up. I am ready to go to the range, and let's head out and see how all this turns out. Okay, our first group, target or bullseye in the upper left. Sierra Tipped MatchKing. Bullseye in the upper right. I like it. Beautiful. Now this next set of 5 that I'll be firing, I'm going to be shooting the Sierra Tipped MatchKings first in this game. I'll be shooting at the bullseye on the right side, immediately below the bullseye that I just shot at. Also, so all my Sierras will be on the right side, all my Speer bullets will be on the left. Now the difference here is in neck tension. That first set had a neck tension of 1,000 thousandth and a half for both the Speer and the Sierra rounds. Now I'll be shooting with about 2.5 thousandths of neck tension. Might make a difference. Now the Sierras tended to shoot best with 2.5 thou of neck tension. I don't really know how those Spears respond, but I guess we're going to find out. Yeah, that was good. Oh, that one flew high. Safe. All right, same deal with these Speer Gold Dots. About 2.5 thousandths of neck tension on these. I'm going to slide over and shoot at the bullseye to the left of what I just shot. Nice. That gun's safe. Well, look at there. That is interesting. Boy, that's beautiful. The Spear looks like it's ready to unseat the king in both cases. I did note that that one flew high. That was shooting really nice here. We're going to go ahead and do 2 more, just for the fun of it, at 200 yards. Spear, lower left target. Beautiful. That one felt good. Sierra Tipped MatchKing. Bullseye in the lower right. Oh, that was really slow. Didn't hit that one. Boy, am I ever happy that I fired those 200-yard groups. You know, in the beginning, the first two groups fired at 100 yards. It was obvious that the Speer Gold Dot was outperforming the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. But since I had everything loaded, I was out at the range, why not continue and shoot that final group at 200 yards? And you know, it's really interesting results. And as I said, I'm really happy I did fire that group. So let's go ahead and take a look at the results here a little bit more closely. 100-yard group, 100-yard group, and then finally that 200-yard group. The Speer Gold Dot, 0.63 MOA 5-shot group versus a Sierra Tipped MatchKing 0.97 MOA group. Same bullet or neck tension, pretty much exactly the same load, the only difference being the bullet. Another 100-yard group, this is round 2 out of 3, 0.76 MOA, 5-shot group, really nice 5-shot group, versus a 1.19 MOA group from the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. And the reason why I fired in this order, by the way, Speer first, then Sierra, then Sierra, then Speer. A little bit of a test also to see if we're seeing an effect from barrel or chamber heating, those sort of things. Don't really think we did. In fact, all of these here, I should also note, every one of these groups, in fact, I felt like I was squeezing the trigger very consistently, gave all of these a very fair shake, very consistent on that trigger. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. One thing that bothered me is this one right here, flew high. I don't think I pulled that. I don't think I did that at all. But if I did, then that 4-shot group really becomes quite small. But then to be fair, look at that one. Maybe I pulled that one also. Maybe that's another flyer. So let's look at that 4-shot group. So if we eliminated those two potential flyers, the Speer Gold Dot still beat the Sierra Tipped MatchKing, but just barely. 0.41 MOA 4-shot group versus a 0.42 MOA 4-shot group. Effectively, really, they would be considered the same. But I am not convinced I did anything to pull those rounds, and it might just be how those bullets flew on that particular moment. So I'm going to stick with my 5-shot group comparisons across the board. So then at 200 yards, you might recall that one of these shots from the Speer Gold Dot flew low, right off the target itself, but I did get a good measurement off of that cardboard backer, so that's all legit. 1.7 MOA group, it really opened up, versus a 0.88 5-shot group from the Sierras. A little bit of horizontal stringing goes on here. I see that fairly frequently, actually. Don't know if that's me or the rounds. Not so sure. But not bad at all. 0.88, very much sub-MOA size group. In fact, 0.8, 0.75 MOA is right in there for those Sierra Tipped MatchKings. Now, what in the world is going on between 100 and 200 yards? Let me explain. So there's this phenomenon, if you want to call it that, called bullets settling in or bullets settling down. Some people call it the bullet has gone to sleep. So here we start talking about the world of intermediate ballistics. We have internal or interior ballistics. That's all the stuff that happens in the chamber, in the round itself, the cartridge, and everything that happens as that bullet is traveling down the bore. And then we have, and many of you are very familiar with this, what we call external or exterior ballistics, and that is the ballistics of the flight of that bullet downrange. Intermediate ballistics is what happens to that bullet over the first couple inches after it leaves the muzzle. So we start seeing a little bit of turbulence. Sometimes we see effect from muzzle devices, those sort of things. And as that bullet is leaving, there is a bit of yaw that happens in the bullet very, very naturally. But as that yaw dissipates, we start getting nice, consistent groups, good performance on target. Some bullets will go to sleep or settle in faster than others. Those ones that settle in faster tend to be shorter bullets. Bullets with sometimes different size boat tail. Remember we talked about that the diameter of the boat tail actually makes a difference in how fast that bullet goes to sleep. As well, and even more so, is the length of the bullet. Because there's turbulence behind that bullet, and as that boat tail or the diameter of the base of the bullet becomes smaller, that turbulence behind the bullet also becomes smaller. So these are, again, two very different shaped bullets. The Speer Gold Dot being much shorter, it settled in really fast, giving us really some very, very, very nice groups at 100 yards. 200 yards started opening up. And I think somewhere between 100 and 200 yards, maybe 125 yards or so, is where that Sierra Tipped MatchKing starts settling in. And we saw a nice group, 0.88 MOA group at five-shot group at 200 yards with that bullet. And you know, I've shot that bullet all the way out to 700 yards, and it does give me some really nice groups. Again, I'm normally getting 0.7 MOA groups, even at 600 and 700 yards. So as I was thinking about these groups, I did a little bit of research, went out to some forums, did some reading on what could be happening, see if other people were seeing the same thing, and yeah, very much so indeed. We have one person who writes that a moderate powder charge, this is a person shooting a 7x57 Mauser, moderate powder charge reduces the diameter of the yaw spiral, that's that intermediate ballistics, and the yaw spiral in general dissipates very soon. 100 yards, moderate load, like what we were shooting at 2,400 feet per second, will settle in very nicely and produce tiny or very, very nice groups. You lighten up that bullet, shorten the bullet, those sort of things. This person is reporting that they had very small groups at 100 yards. Groups at 200 yards were abysmal, and bullets ended up tumbling for this person at 300 yards. So I think that's what we're starting to see with this round. Those Speer Gold Dots, again, worked so well at relatively close range, but they're starting to fall apart at longer ranges. What I said earlier is that this rifle, the Ruger Precision Rifle, tends to shoot shorter bullets better than longer bullets, but I think I went too short. And perhaps the sweet spot for this Ruger Precision Rifle is maybe a 1.25 inch overall length on the bullet, 1.3 inch like we're seeing with the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. Let's take a few minutes now to talk about the muzzle velocities and the consistency of those velocities. And I'll tell you, I had a little bit of problems with the lab radar. It just was not recording every one of the shots. In fact, my very last group that I fired, the Sierras at 200 yards, only recorded one of those 5 shots. Nonetheless, we do have some pretty good data for the others. The Speer bullets are pretty much giving me 2,400 feet per second out of the muzzle. The first group I fired had a horrendous standard deviation of 78.7, whereas the second group had also a very high standard deviation of 25.4 feet per second. None of those are good. That 78 is like, I don't know that I've ever had a group that bad. 78.7 feet per second standard deviation. That is just tremendous. Now, why is there's such a difference between those groups? One of the reasons, remember, certainly could be the neck tension that's put on those bullets. And this kind of suggests that the, if you want to call it heavier neck tension, or 2.5 thousandths neck tension, is going to be better for this bullet in the long run. The Sierra's pretty much giving me 2,500 feet per second muzzle velocity, and had a better standard deviation of those muzzle velocities, but still a little bit high. I frequently have seen single digits. I'm at 16 and 17 respectively. Then that Speer load at 200 yards, even though it didn't do well on paper, the precision was bad. The standard deviation, the muzzle velocities was very nice, 7.3 feet per second. Now, if that was high, I could, of course, argue that driving down those standard deviations or having more consistent muzzle velocities would then improve that group. But that's not the case. We had very consistent muzzle velocities and yet a very poor performance on paper. Now, while the Speer Gold Dot had a pretty good showing at 100 yards, I'm not going to complain about that. The fact that it really fell apart beyond that at the 200 yards indicates a couple of things to me. Number one, I am going to do some more shooting and some more testing with this, but I think the handwriting is on the wall pretty clearly. All hail the king, the Sierra Tipped MatchKing. You know, another thing I wanted to mention is I now have 44 5-shot groups that I have recorded with this bullet. Sometimes 100 yards, sometimes 200 yards, etc. And the mean group size of those 44 different groups is 1.0 MOA, 0.99 MOA median. So very consistent that way. And this also includes my kind of wild and extreme tests I've done with this bullet with some very different neck tensions, different brass and all different stuff. And I wonder if I would exclude some of those, be able to identify and exclude some of those tests. Of course, my sample size goes down, but of course, group sizes are going to drop down into what I oftentimes talk about, that 0.7 MOA size groups. Well, this was certainly a fun and worthwhile experiment. I hope you can gain some information out of this. If you're interested in sharing some of your observations, your experience, certainly put that into the comments below. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Take care.